Okay guys, this is a special edition of MrProggers, and in this edition we're going to be going through 10 albums that I have chosen from the year 2013 this year. This is 10 albums that were released this year that I will highly recommend to you, the listener. Not all of these albums are going to be considered prog. Many of them will be, but what I'm trying to do with this episode particularly is introduce you to not only some new prog music that is out there, but progressive music in general. Music that I believe has taken some liberties to expand horizons, so to speak. So there'll be some prog. There'll be some just different sorts of music. But we'll go ahead and get started. And there's really no specific order that I'm going in. I'm not doing like a top 10. There's not going to be any numbers beside the albums. But we'll go ahead and start with the album Cosmograph. This is sort of a journey album, and if you like space rock, like Hawkwind, early Floyd, conceptual space fantasy albums like David Bowie's Space Oddity, you should enjoy this offering from Cosmograph. It is prog. It is complex. It's pastoral. It's heavy. It's saturated with lots of Pink Floyd influence. It's spacey both in style and in content. It's literally about space. The album itself is a very haunting album. I mean, you can probably tell by the title track. It goes through like a myriad of emotions, progressive music changes, and like a sci-fi sound effects. Not cheesy sound effects, but something that would come from a Roger Waters album or a Floyd album. So that would be one album that I would highly recommend that you check out. The next album I would recommend that you check out is called The Knife, Shaking the Habitual. I'm sure many prog fans will hit the roof over this, and probably several other bands that I'll name. But like I said, this show is about progressive music as well as prog. It also is about, indie, psychedelic, jazz, any style of music that I think is helping the music industry. Okay? And I think that The Knife, Shaking the Habitual is helping the music industry in its creativity. The Knife is the 21st century's answer to Radiohead. I know that's going to blow some minds because to even touch Radiohead is, sacrilege to a lot of Radiohead fans. But I'm just telling you. This album can hook you with catchy melodies, or it can irreverently create a soundscape as lush as like Tangerine Dream. There's a lot of variety on this album, but there's also a lot of exploration. So I recommend picking up a copy of this or listening to it. The Knife, Shaking the Habitual. The next album that I would recommend is from an artist that I really enjoy. I have enjoyed this artist for quite a long time. And his name is Devendra Banhart, and he's got an album called Mala. I don't know any Devendra Banhart album that has more variety than this release. I'm a major fan of Devendra. I saw Devendra in Atlanta about 3 years ago, and he put on a great show. He's a great guy, His style hasn't changed much, but he has expanded it. He's adapted more influence in what he does, and you can tell in this album. I mean, I think that's a good thing. This album sort of represents the best of Devendra for me. He's got this trippy, carefree image, especially in songs like "I Feel Just Like a Child," which is not off this album, but an earlier album. But it still keeps the Devendra, you know, mystique, I suppose. This album is wistful and fun, just like any other Devendra album. It's dramatic, it's melancholy, it's poignant, everything Devendra is. So, if you don't know Devendra, or if you like Devendra, pick up a copy of this album, Devendra Banhart, Mala. The next album is by another indie band. But I do feel that this band is very progressive, but they're incredibly retro. That's not that's not an oxymoron. That's not a contradiction. They're incredibly retro. They're playfully psychedelic. They're very indie, and they're very pop. But again, they contribute to the progression of music. This band is sort of like another band that I'll talk about later called MGMT. They wouldn't fall into the prog sphere, but they're very experimental and epic. They're very influenced by 60s garage psych music, Syd Barrett's sort of wistful, fantasy-like whimsy. But it's a great representation of progression in 2013 because it takes a lot of the elements of old school and puts them into this album. And it's an album that could be old school, but it's not. It was released this year, so I recommend checking it out. Foxygen. We are the 21st century ambassadors of peace and love, or something like that. This album is called The Mountain, and it's by a prog band called Haken. There's, the thing about a lot of prog today is that there's this slick, processed sound, lots of double bass, lots of Steve Perry style vocalists, every solo sounding like Joe Satriani, and it's just real, what I can consider to be like AOR prog or something, contemporary prog. It's starting to sound too much like the same style, the same sort of music. I can give you some examples, but I'm not going to do it because it would, anger some prog fans. So, but Hagen borders on this sound, but they go above and beyond here. They're attempting to be progressive in music, and that's widely appreciated by prog fans and progressive fans alike. They have a variety, sort of like Steven Wilson's Raven album, where they have implemented the last 30 years of all kinds of influences in prog and put it in this album. Actually, this album's a little bit more ambitious than the Raven. I think there's more to offer as far as variety on this album than Steven Wilson's album. But the Raven still appeals more to me. It's still more of a brainworm, I suppose. But anyways, yeah, Haken, The Mountain. Next one is Jim James, Regions of Light and Sound of God. The Regions of Light and Sound of God. This is a charming, dreamy little spiritual journey. I'd almost call it psychologically healing. Jim James is, better known for his work with My Morning Jacket. His voice has always had a very warm, comforting quality to it. But this album is an extension of James's mind, and it takes you into a whole new level of reality. It's like a voyage or an odyssey, and I really think this album is like literature in musical form. So I would highly suggest this album, Jim James, Regions of Light and Sound of God. The next album is by a band called MGMT, and the album's called MGMT. This album was a nice surprise to me. It's commercial, but it's very progressive. It's not considered prog. But it is innovative. It's fresh. It's complex. It's lush, and that's what makes it progressive. That's what I mean, it's a bit indulgent, but most prog is indulgent. It's whimsical, and there's just something about this album that requires repeated listenings. I just really like it. But again, it's MGMT. Next would be the Unknown Mortal Orchestra, and this is their latest release in 2013. I can't get the song From the Sun out of my head. This is on this album. Can't get it out of my head. This band's atmospheric, yet they're campy. They're cerebral, yet they're whimsical. They run the gamut, so to speak. This album is addictive. I really, really enjoy this album. A lot of people talk about the Black Angels Indigo Meadow, which I do recommend, but if I had to choose one over the other, I would choose Unknown Mortal Orchestra. I enjoy this album to the point that I have to stop myself from listening. So that's a good job. Good job, guys. The next album, the new release of Seguros. I think this band is like a cathartic band. But I think it's moving in a good direction. They keep their ethereal, spacey style, their airy, the style that they've had on their previous albums. Yet on this album they seem to expand a little bit more. It's more rousing and less sleepy on this album, less ambient. Well, I won't say less ambient. It's still very ambient, but it's very moving. This album is a lot more moving, and this is really the only Seguros album that I have listened to multiple times. They're usually a band that I can listen to an album and be like, oh yeah, that's cool, or not. But this is an album that I really enjoy by the band. They've added a bit more sparkle. The last album is going to be an album I've already reviewed, so I'm not going to talk that much about it, but it's highly recommended. Steven Wilson released it this year, The Raven That Refused to Sing. I've already reviewed this album, rated it as the perfect album for beginners of prog. It is a prog album. It combines the last 35 years of influence in prog and puts it in one album and nearly in one song, Luminal, as well as the typical familiar Porcupine Tree sound, because he was the founder and singer of Porcupine Tree. It's a superb album. It's my favorite of 2013. I highly recommend it along with the other albums. If you haven't checked the review of it that I reviewed earlier, then I'd suggest doing that. Anyways, Raven That Refused to Sing, Steven Wilson. Those are 10 albums in 2013 you need to check out. MrProggers highly recommends them.